Are we live? We are live. Welcome, everyone. My name is January Rogers, and I'm one of the publishing hosts for this evening's Ogweho Writes. And to my understanding, this is the first time that an event like this, which features both Six Nations publishing houses hosting an event for their authors and also here to answer any of your publishing questions, has ever been hosted here on the territory. So that's pretty cool in and of itself. I want to welcome everyone who's here in the audience today and also those who are joining us online. We are going to have host a number of authors. Oh, I hope you can see behind the camera. We're going to have 4 authors reading from their books, which also represent the publishers that are hosting here today. And then we're going to be having a panel of publishers. So again, if you have questions around publishing, that's what we're here to entertain this evening as well. We want to thank Great for allowing us to be in the theater this evening. It's a lovely setup, and they've been very good to us and very good to work with. And thanks to also Bookland Press, who traveled in from Mississauga today to be here, part of the publishing panel. And thanks to our authors who have also made their way here today on this lovely day on June 29th, almost at the end of June. So to start, hey, how's it going, Brenda? And just to let you know that we do have a wonderful spread of food. It looks like a big old feast out there, and we are allowed to eat in this theater. So if you don't go hungry, hey, like don't suffer. Like go and enjoy some of that food and get some nice strawberry drink and bring it on back, and relax and be part of this evening. It's so great. To open everything, we're going to start with one of the authors from Turtle's Back Publishing. And I do want to just, mention the other publisher who is here, which is Gabizita Rosetta. Gabizita? Give her a hand. And her whole team, because there's a whole entourage of people that are making this happen from that end of things. And I'm here representing Ojistoh Publishing, which is based here on Six Nations, and I have one of my authors here, Dawn Cheryl Hill. But to open, we are going to start with a Turtle's Back author, Judy Rubin. Judy's going to open our authors reading this evening. Judy is Mohawk Turtle Clan and from Six Nations of the Grand River, and she holds a master's degree in curriculum development and policy studies. Judy has worked for 37 years in Indigenous education, including as an educator, a leader, a university, a seasonal instructor, author, and elementary school principal. She volunteered with the Ontario College of Teachers accreditation program and was a working member of the provincial team who reviewed the current Ontario elementary curriculum for the Ontario Ministry of Education. Judy retired in October of 2017, but does any Haudenosaunee woman really retire? Not to my knowledge. In 2017, but assumed a role as the Director of Education of Six Nations Polytechnic STEAM Academy. That doesn't sound like retirement to me. See what I mean? Judy is married and has 3 children and 5 beautiful grandchildren. Please welcome Judy Rubin reading from her book, Memory of Feast, Memories of Residential School Survivors by Turtle's Back Publishing. I'll get right out of your way.
Sego Sewa Gwego, Judy Rubin ni Iyungyats, and as you heard, I'm Mohawk Turtle Clan, and I'm from Ohsweken, born and raised. So, is that better? Okay. All right. So how I got started in writing, I was hired by the Ontario Native Literacy Coalition to write curriculum, and at the same time, in one of the curriculum was on food sustainability, and out of that came an interview with 20 residential school survivors from Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba. Every story is unique, yet every story, when you look at it, has commonalities right across. So I'm going to share with you tonight one particular story of a young boy named John. But I want to tell you that when I interviewed the residential school survivors, they're primarily 60, 70 years old. So when I asked them these questions, it was interesting because all of them closed their eyes, put a smile on their face, and they were home, and they were like 6 years old, 10 years old. That's what they had to do. They had to go backwards in their memory and tell me what it was like before they went into residential school, and then what it was like during, and then we talked about afterwards what it was like now for them and their involvement. So I'm going to share with you tonight a story by a young boy named John. At the age of 10, and due to truancy on the Reserve Day School, John was taken to the Mohawk Institute in Brantford. John smiles as he refers to this school as the mush hole. John said, "I'd rather go trapping or hunting skunk than go to school." John recalls that three fur buyers would regularly come to Middleport, a community directly across from the Grand River. Along with his brother and his sister, John would make the trek to Middleport on Saturday afternoons to sell his furs. John would make enough money in those early days, and as a young boy, to buy groceries for his family for a week. John grinned as he said to me, "Now that's a pretty good reason to skip school." When he was older, John and his brother would have to take their furs to North Bay just to meet the fur buyers. On September 7th, 1947, John and his brother and sister were driven to the mush hole by his grandfather, who had to borrow his buddy's old car. John said that after they were dropped off, the other boys living at the mush hole showed them around, and he described himself as a tough kid who wasn't afraid of nothing. John and his brother didn't like what they saw at the residential school, so they immediately ran away on their first day. John recalls running down the train tracks from Brantford through to Onondaga and toward the reserve. Meanwhile, his grandpa had to take the gravel road with the old beat-up car, then cross the river by a slow ferry, and then drive home. John and his brother were waiting at home on the front step when his grandpa arrived. His grandpa explained to the boys that they were sent by the government to the residential school and that it wasn't he who had sent them away. His grandpa had promised the officials who were already out looking for the boys that he would take them back, and that's exactly what he did. John stayed at the Mohawk Institute for 5 years, and then in that time he ran away 30+ times. John said, "I always ran away at Christmas because I wanted to be at home." He faced punishment every time he ran away. Sometimes it was a slap on the ass, and sometimes it was solitary confinement in the dark under the stairs without any food. John recalled that a young buddy of his took a risk by sliding a piece of bread under the door for him to eat. As a young child, John's favorite foods were mostly traditional foods mixed with canned preserves and potatoes. John's mother did all the canning. His father showed him a bit about how to hunt a deer. And at the age of 15 years old, John shot his first big buck. It was so big that he had to bring a horse and a sled to bring it home. This meat was shared with all of his relatives, and it was John and his brother who enjoyed trapping and bringing home rabbits, partridge, raccoons, and squirrels. The hindquarters were boiled, then roasted in the oven of a wood stove. His mother would make soup out of the broth. John smiled as he recalled the taste of the broth. It was really rich in flavor with vegetables added. And again, John smiled. Although his mother was the primary cook in the house, John said that everyone had to learn how to cook. When he was 15 or 16 years old, he cooked pan bread on his own for Sunday dinner, but before dinner was served, John had sold the bread in exchange for cigarettes, and then he was punished for making that poor choice. Even as a young boy, John helped with food preparations by cutting wood and bringing it in for the wood stove. His grandpa owned property, so trees were cut and logs were piled up. John did not like the taste of the food that was served at the Mohawk Institute, but that's all there was to eat, so he had to eat it or starve. He recalled a time during the spring flood when the pike were left on the flats behind the Mohawk Chapel near the Grand River. John and his brother brought the fish into the kitchen. Both boys were covered in mud and were all wet, but the cook at the time in the kitchen took pity on them and prepared the fish for John's table of 6 boys. That was a good memory, he said, shaking his head, smiling and laughing. As an adult, John went to live with his dad in Detroit, Michigan, where he worked as a construction painter. He remembers being able to buy his own clothes, going to the Union Hall, and working for 15 years. John married and continued working as a residential painter all over the United States and Canada. Today, John enjoys attending residential school gatherings that bring together survivors and their families. John participates in the Woodland Cultural Center Survivor Series, where he shares his personal experience and works to educate others on this shameful part of Canadian history. John always has a story to share, highlighted by his great sense of humor. John's story is one of determination, strong will, and resilience. John Elliott is a survivor. Nyawa.
Well done and well read. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. It's so important that we have these stories available and that these stories come from our own community. And there is a sense of importance in that, in that we grow the ecosystem of the Indigenous literature practice. And that's exactly what we do as Indigenous publishers. So Judy, thank you. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce a person who, I'm not sure if they set out to be a writer necessarily, but they certainly have found their way as a writer, and I recognize their talent as a writer when Dawn Cheryl Hill approached me with some of her stories and said, would you have a look? And this has been the person who I published through Ojistoh Publishing. Dawn is a member of the Mohawk Nation Turtle Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River. She's a registered social worker and currently works at the Six Nations Family Health Team, which is located in historical downtown Ohsweken, as a clinical social worker. Dawn grew up at the Tuscarora Reservation in Lewiston, New York. Dawn received a BA in Community Mental Health from the University of Buffalo, where she also received a Master's of Social Work there. Dawn has been writing short story memoirs about her family and her time growing up with 13 siblings for the past 15 years. Memory Keeper is her published collection. Dawn's stories depict anecdotes, however comedic or horrific, from her life on the res. These stories helped her to circumnavigate constructively the residual pain and dysfunction that is the legacy of the residential school system. As a psychiatric social worker, Dawn does not leave the reader impacted by the shock and trauma of her stories. Instead, she offers a small workbook companion with the published collection as a healing resource for her readers. And I'm so proud to say that Memory Keeper is a title with Ojistoh Publishing, and we're going into reprint of Memory Keeper very, very soon. Please welcome Dawn Cheryl Hill.
Sego, Ogweho, Yungyats, Dawn Cheryl Hill, Anola Niwagita Loden. Yeah, I can't remember the rest. I feel really bad. Usually I have a cheat sheet with me so I can introduce myself in Mohawk. Trying to learn my language, not easy to do, trying to get back what was taken from my mom. As January stated, I never set out to write a book. I write kind of as narrative therapy to help me feel better. And that's what I do. It kind of do a brain dump in the morning, write a story that just comes out. And usually I would send it to my sister, share it with them, and they'd laugh or cry or write back and say, I didn't know that happened to you, or wow, So that's what Memory Keeper is all of those stories that I have shared with my sisters over the years. So I just want to say that at the front of this book is a picture of my mother, Hazel Leona Venevri, and the first time I saw this picture was on September 30th, 2017 at the Woodland Cultural Center. At the end of the day, after I had went there and been a Ojistoh, a big crybaby the whole day, and I saw this picture because Tammy Martin had sent it to me, as well as the one on the back. And I kept flipping between the two pictures on my phone, thinking, who is this? This looks like my son. It looks like my sister. It looks like me. Who is this? I had never seen this picture before. And Tammy texted me and said, that's your mother, September 1st, 1934, as she was getting processed into the mush hole. Yeah, I was a Ojistoh. I was more than an Ojistoh. I was a crybaby sobbing for quite a bit before I could get together and get myself together enough to drive home. So I want to share. Okay, now you can hear me? All right, I thought I talked really loud, I guess not. Okay, so I want to share the first chapter. It's called Disassociation. I'll just read it. I won't talk about it. My mom and I sat across from each other at the table on an unseasonably warm Indian summer day in 1979. The dining room table sat at the far end of the living room. Behind the table was an oversized mahogany buffet that was chock full of my mom's beads and beadwork in various stages of completion. In the corner of the room was her matching mahogany curved glass china cabinet that held all her treasures. Our dining room table was so old, it probably could have qualified as an antique. There were whitened scorch marks on the top of it where someone had set down a hot pan. On one side of the table was a bench that my father had engineered many years before I was even born. It was made of 2x4s with some type of rough-hewn planks nailed on top with an apron on each side. At one time, it was painted John Deere green, but you could barely see that, as the wood and the paint had been worn so smooth and shiny by all the children seated upon it over the years. None of the chairs matched, and whatever fabric upholstery that once covered the seat of my chair was long gone. I could feel something crinkly underneath my leg as I sat there in my jeans and Oxford button-down shirt. I was home for the weekend from Keuka College, an all-girls college in the Finger Lakes region of New York. I was working on a paper about trauma, and I wanted to ask my mother all about her experiences when she was at the mush hole as a child. At that time, I wasn't aware of the official name it went by, the Mohawk Institute. I only knew that everyone called it the mush hole. I had my pen in hand and a notebook, ready to fill it with my mother's reminiscence about her time as a child, interned there with her two sisters. She never spoke of it, so I wasn't sure which two sisters were with her at the mush hole. It was probably about 10:30 on a Saturday morning. My mom had been up for a while, and she was sitting at the table beading. Her long salt and pepper hair was braided and pinned up behind her head. That morning, it was a little unruly, and wisps of it stood up around her face. My mom was once a beauty. After birthing and raising 10 children and living a life full of hard knocks, she looked older than her 54 years. She had on an orange paisley pattern house dress and a pair of brown polyester pants underneath it. I'm sure her sister, Mary Penny, had made the pants for her. The moo-moo might have been a creation of my Aunt Pen as well. My mom, Hazel Leona Venevri Hill, was born on the Six Nations Reservation in Ohsweken, Ontario, in 1925. She was the eldest of 10 children born to Titus Venevri and Vera Beulah Thomas. My mom shared the same dark complexion of her father, as well as his rather prominent proboscis. Her Grandpa Ty's nose was passed on to my sister Dolores and my brothers David and Ty. I can imagine myself practically dancing down those stairs because I wanted to get a jump on this paper. I wanted to get it outlined, draft it, and hopefully ready to type up once I got back to Keuka. I sat down across from her. I set down my paper and my pen, and I started to explain to her that I had just completed a paper on the Jewish Holocaust for my diversity and oppression class. And I mentioned how I wanted to write about her experiences at residential school. I wanted to compare and contrast her experiences with cultural and linguistic genocide to that of straight-up genocide that the Jewish people experienced in Nazi Germany. I especially wanted to know how she and her sisters ended up at the mush hole, how long they stayed there, what she learned, what happened, what it was like. I began with a simple question of, how old were you when you went to the mush hole? At that moment, my mom changed. Before my eyes, she disappeared. Her eyes went blank, and it seemed like she suddenly had, or maybe always had, nictating eyelids. Somehow I had never noticed that before. It looked like this other membrane had unexpectedly swept across her eyes, and she no longer saw me or the room we sat in. I could imperceptibly hear a loud clang like a gate was slamming shut around her. I continued to talk, and I kept asking questions, but she had morphed into that girl with the faraway eyes from the Rolling Stones song. I couldn't reach her anymore. It hit me like a sledgehammer. I was seeing someone dissociate. However, it wasn't someone in the midst of a therapy session. It was my mom. This was way too real and frightening. I thought it was all my fault. What I was studying in college, in textbooks about psychological pathology, had somehow led this chicken home to roost. She was definitely disconnected from her thoughts, possibly from her own identity, and in that moment, possibly from her own identity in that moment. I always believed my professor when she said that the mind is a very powerful thing. And in that moment, it was giving my mom a way out. She had shut down, opted out, emotionally detached. I felt the cold hand of fear on the back of my neck, and panic began to rise in me. My biggest fear was that I was never going to get her back. I called her name, Mom, Mama, Mommy, but my voice didn't seem to register anywhere within her. I put my hand on her shoulder, and she flinched and pulled away. Louder, I said, Mama, can you hear me? Slowly, she relaxed a little bit. She blinked. Her eyes changed and seemed to regain some focus. She looked at me, but she didn't say anything. I said her name again, and I asked her if she was okay. It seemed like it was taking her a little bit longer to process my presence, my questions. I completely lost my desire to ask her any more questions. I didn't want to trigger more unpleasant or hurtful memories for her. She finally said that she was okay, and then she picked up her beading needle, and she continued to bead the edging on the barrette she had been working on. There was no more to say. All the questions I had were gone, left unanswered. My concern for her emotional well-being far overshadowed my desire for answers in that moment. It's been over 40 years since I attempted to expose my mother's tenuous connection to the memories from her childhood. I never tried to dredge up her recollections again. Over time, a thought occurred to me. In her silence, was she protecting herself, or was she protecting me? My mother was there from 9 to 16 years old. Thank you.
Don, I don't know if you recognize that the lights were really playing tricks while you were reading. And perhaps that's a little bit of spirit activity. So, you know, it's important, again, just kind of validating the necessity for us to speak our own stories, eh? And I feel very, very proud that there's more than just one publisher here on the territory. And actually, we came into being around the same time. Turtles Back came into being in 2019, and I followed suit in 2020. So we're relatively young, new publishers here on the territory. But I wanted to start publishing because I kind of knew that there was a lot more writers on this territory than anyone really could think that there are. And I think we're only going to see that number of writers grow and grow. The next reader is actually one of the editors from Turtles Back Publishing, reading from one of their large volumes of work that they published about lacrosse. And even though I don't have a bio for Gabizita Rosetta, I do want to say that in the short little time that I have known her and worked with her, it's been an absolute pleasure. We're very, very passionate about what we do in terms of bringing words out into the world, birthing volumes of books and so on and so forth. And I don't know if you want me to say, Gabizita, but Gabizita's going home soon. So going home to the Southwest pretty soon. So Turtles Back has got their work cut out for them finding a replacement for Gabizita. So please welcome Gabizita Rosetta, rather.
Testing? Okay. Go it's a whole but you may ask a quotana. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexandra Rosetta. My nickname is Gabby, also Gabicita. So I'm the publishing manager for Turtles Back Publishing. We were established in 2019. And when I came on board, this was probably the first book, first literary piece that I worked on. And what an amazing project. We had brought on two individuals, Brendan Bromberry and Brenna Jacobs, both from Six Nations. And unfortunately, neither of them could make it today. They're both doing their passions, lacrosse. Brendan's out playing in San Diego with Haudenosaunee Nationals, and Brenner Jacobs is, I think, at a game tonight with the Arrows, Six Nations Arrows. So I am going to read a piece. So this book here, I'm going to show it real quick. Ogweho, My Big Family, was meant to be a 10 people interview. I believe probably less than 50 pages, nothing heavy. It turned into about a 435-page book with over 55 plus interviews from amazing, great lacrosse players all across not only Turtle Island, but also Europe. And these stories are just individually passionate about the game and what it's given to them, and what they've given back to the communities and to their own lives as well. So not only did Brendan and Brenner contribute to this book, but we did reach out to other writers. And so tonight I'm going to read a piece by Chesney Martin, who did an article on recently passed renowned stick maker, Alfie Jacques. So I'm going to show you real quick. This was done in 2019. So I know we all know him and his history, so I thought this would be a respectful piece to read. Alfie Jacques turned 71 this year. This counts the 59th year that he's been crafting traditional lacrosse sticks, just 1 year shy of 6 decades. A member of the Onondaga Nation, Turtle Clan, Jacques has crafted his coveted traditional wooden lacrosse sticks at a barn at the end of a dirt driveway on the Onondaga Nation reservation, just a few miles south of one of the present top UCAA lacrosse institutions, Syracuse University. In the beginning of 1960, Jacques and his family couldn't afford to buy him a stick, which at the time went for $5. This took him and his father to make their own by cutting down a hickory tree in the backyard. Through this, a legacy was born. Since then, the game of lacrosse has blossomed, and lacrosse fans have come from far beyond the edges of the Onondaga Nation for his sticks. Today, Jacques has also become an educator on the game that he fell in love with, While attending the Randy Hall Memorial Tournament in New York for his 4th consecutive year, Jacques said that he takes as many opportunities to showcase the extensive variety and collection of sticks as he can. I share the knowledge, says Jacques as he motioned to his tables full of lacrosse history. I have different balls, different sticks, and old-style Iroquois sticks from 1892. There's even a couple of original plastic sticks too, he said, and pointed to the Great Lakes-style, Southern-style tandem sticks, among so many more. The authenticity of his display is as abundant as what could be expected of a museum, but unlike a glass display, Jacques allows visitors and youngsters to touch and handle the sticks. I keep up to date with things, and I teach. And I think people appreciate it because where is anybody in the USA going to find stuff like this? He asked as he carefully picked up a Menominee stick. You might find one in a museum once in a while, but not like this. In 2017, Jacques was also a vendor at the U.S. Lacrosse National Convention alongside present stars such as the Thompson brothers at the Baltimore Convention Center. The lineup that included the Thompson brothers drew 2,810 fans, a record for a fan fest, and 7,130 participants overall. This brings Jacques to a high level of notoriety for his work. Oftentimes, Jacques displays sticks that are older than anyone that views them, with some reaching 100 years of age. The oldest are a glimpse into the history that he spreads out onto 2 humble tables. At home, since many traditional lacrosse stick makers have passed or retired, Jacques is still running one of the last old school stick production joints in the country. I keep the tradition alive by making the sticks and carrying it on to the other people by showing the sticks and having the sticks for sale, he said. Today, he makes about 200 sticks per year. In his heyday, he could make thousands, clocking in about 11,000 in 1972. Although retired from the other aspects of the game, he said that doing what he does now is wonderful. It's a wonderful place to be. Lacrosse has been in my whole life, he said. You know, all of the guys that are playing today, Squires, Bomberries, and all of them guys, I played against their grandfathers. So I'm still in the game this way. Not playing, not coaching. I retired from coaching, but I'm still giving the game this way. As part of the Haudenosaunee Nation, lacrosse has been regarded as a game that has been inherited through the creation of man. First played by the twins that created the earth, the reverence of the game gave it the autonomy to heal the people as a medicine, decide political options, and determine the outcome of future events. For the certain purpose of each game, it is said that a specific ball was played with. Originally, the only rule in lacrosse was not to touch the ball with the hands. It's our game, he said. So, in memory of Jacques, that was something he contributed to us. And this book is, yes, it may be heavy, but every lacrosse, any person that's, passionate about the game can really appreciate this book. You don't have to read it chronologically. You open it and you have a story that's so personal. So I am very proud of being a part of this, and I'm very proud of the boys for doing this, and I'm glad that it's really reached great heights. Nitra.
Yeah, I'm going to raise this a bit here. And I want to thank, through the red door, Gary Joseph over here for live streaming for us tonight. So that way we can reach. Thank you, Gary, and his team who was in here earlier today setting everything up. That way we can reach more people. So I hope there are some folks at home enjoying what we're offering this evening. I'm going to read a bit from my book, just because it was the first collection that I published on my label. I kind of used myself as my own guinea pig to see if I could actually publish a volume of work, and this is what came of it. So this is Ego of a Nation, published in 2020, and it was the latest collection of my poetry at the time. I came up as a poet. This is my 7th published poetry collection, And now I've kind of switched things around, and I'm working a lot in script writing and screenwriting and playwriting. And those things are going really well. But I'm just going to read a brief couple of pieces for you, and then we're going to head into our publishing panel. This first piece is called Listen to Each Other Breathe. Seasons are treaties, not bad decisions, but agreements negotiated cleverly by old deities when they roamed a very different earth than today. Human energies exist as collective consciousness, latent awarenesses, awakens us, makes change in delicate, deliberate, and very slow motion waves. We've got no reason to complain, except for the water, except for the weather. When we reach into the earth, we have no words to define what we once recognized and had libraries of languages to describe. We stand, closed eyes, listen to each other breathe, work the prayers together. This is unromantic. This is reclamation, proactivity. Go. Pull smoke from the pipe. Wash it over. Feel the tingle of herbs on the tongue manifesting peace words. Hold berries between your fingers and remember fun. Love is so silly, but we still love. And the second piece I'll read is Uprooted, Isolated. Land. With shadows thick as morning mist, hold space for me and mine. Peace flows slow within the river. Never uprooted as much as we have been challenged by unnatural hunger. We never move. They keep writing rules and ways to shift us. We stand in place, clinging to each other. And when I say each other, I mean you and me. We never move. We are new and isolated humans, cultivated through colonization. Connection is weak compared to action. We are still writing history. What do we say when asked for proof? We say, we are right here. Thank you. Yeah. And it's almost like the lacrosse stick maker who, maybe he doesn't play anymore, but he can participate in the game by making sticks. And that's kind of how I feel. Like I'm not really writing to publish much anymore, but I can still participate in the native literature and native literary practices. Let's get our panelists up on the stage, please, if you would not mind. Robert Morgan, please come to the stage. Cindy Lynn Martin, please come to the stage. And Gabazita, come to the stage. Yeah. Thank you. So what this panel is meant to do is to give us a little overview of the publishing experience, both from the publishers, but also from the writers who, I think there's a great mystery that exists for new writers who are wondering, how do I break through? How do I approach a publisher? And also for the publishers themselves, maybe perhaps wondering, how do I even manage this onslaught, this burgeoning amount of new native writers that are coming onto the stage, where we're going to find out this evening. I want to introduce you to Robert Morgan, right here. The gentleman. Now, Robert, I invited to this panel because he is editor and manager of Bookland Press from Mississauga, as I said. And Robert, I met Robert at a Indigenous literary summit at the Banff Center, if you recall. And it was so interesting to meet Robert there because I don't think many of us knew at that time, but Robert, before any of this reconciliation rhetoric started popping up, Robert had already started an Indigenous, modern Indigenous Voices series, although it was called differently, yeah? We're going to use the microphone that has the wire on it, and you guys are going to share that one, if that's okay. But what was it called before, Robert, the Modern Indigenous Voices?
It was Canadian Aboriginal Voices.
Canadian Aboriginal Voices.
Then we changed it to modern, and then we changed it to modern Indigenous Voices.
Right. And do you remember how you did that? Why you did that?
Well, for the obvious reasons.
Yes, because I told him to do that, if you recall. So, and it was wonderful because we got to meet in the airport because your flight flight was delayed, and I thought, okay, what a better time to pitch a publisher a new volume of work than when they're stuck in the airport with you. So that's exactly what we did. I'm just going to go on and read this. Gary's fixing the lighting. Oh. Whoa. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Yes, now we're all lit. Thank you. Bookland Press is a fast-growing Canadian publishing company established in 2006 in Ontario. He says they publish books portraying literary excellence, the great value of the country and our diverse Canadian society. We're committed to publishing and promoting books written by culturally diverse Canadian authors, Indigenous authors, people with disabilities, and official language minority authors. Our interests range from contemporary poetry to fiction, creative nonfiction, and translations. We are particularly interested in literature that is different, exciting, and awakens us to angles of the world that we have not noticed before. Bookland Press is one of the few independent publishers in Canada that publishes books not only in English but also in various Indigenous languages on an ongoing basis. Bookland Press is a member of the Literary Press Group of Canada. And they do include a land acknowledgement on their website. So welcome, Robert. And it's your first time to Six Nations, yeah?
Actually, yes, it's first time here, and thank you very much for inviting me. But it's not a coincidence. You know, we publish quite a few authors from Six Nations, including you.
Yes.
Of course, and Marie Hess.
Yes.
Is another First Nations author who published 2 books with us.
Oh.
So very happy to be here.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Get it, this guy. Okay, if you're interested in writing. Cindy Lynn Martin, thank you for joining us this evening. Cindy is a local author of 3 books entitled.
The first book was Recover, Rebuild, Reclaim Self, and the second one is Protector of Peace. And I had the opportunity to, I wrote one for my work, and it was called The Boy with No Name.
Oh, I didn't know that one. Okay. And also you're a self-help speaker, a wellness speaker. And I wanted to make mention of the book, The Reconnection Journey Through the Tree Rings, which is self-published.
It's a traditional wellness model that has been implemented in the first book. It's to help people recover, reconnect to themselves, their family, and their culture. Okay. And it's to help them understand the importance of traditional health, for the importance of empowering them to find strength, peace, and a good mind.
Thank you. And the children's book that Cindy had authored is available through Eagle Speaker Publishing and Amazon, on Amazon Books, yeah?
Yes.
And then Gabizita Rosie Alexandra. You know what, you didn't give me a bio, so I don't know. You tell us what you'd like us to know about you, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, well, I'm Gabby Rosetta. Majority of everyone knows me as Gabby. Professionally, I'm Alexandra. I'm from the Pueblo of Santo Domingo, New Mexico, USA. And I joined Turtles Back Publishing in 2019, brought on as a publishing manager, and we, prior to that, I was working as a technical writer and editor for an environmental company out in New Mexico. So we did a lot of government grants and a lot of government work. So that was a lot of fun. So coming up here and transitioning into Indigenous publishing was quite a change of pace. And I have not regretted it since. I've grown so much and enjoy publishing. It's such a big world. And I'm very grateful to mentors like the Association of Canadian Publishers for helping me, because I was just new to it, and Turtles Back grew with me. And so they really helped Turtles Back out, and Um, yeah.
Thank you, because that really leads me into the first question I have for you all. And that is, explain what you do as publishers and what you have done to seek out a publisher. Maybe if you want to start, Gabby, since you have the microphone.
Okay. So for us, since we're a division of the Ontario Native Literacy Coalition, our specific audience are adult learners, and we do create resources and curriculum, language resources, and we just started doing literary works just like the lacrosse book you saw earlier. And it's all for our 19 adult literacy programs all across Ontario. And we base it off of a kind of a rubric of where our learners are at, and these resources help them with getting into education or getting into a trades, and a lot of them are maybe high school level resources, and we have several that are curriculum based, like the sustainable food system that Judy Rubin does. And Judy Rubin is an amazing curriculum writer, and she's contributed a lot to Turtles Back Publishing, as well as our language resources. So we do a lot of the languages in the Haudenosaunee languages, Anishinaabe. We're trying to find different dialects of the Anishinaabe language, and Cree as well. And we just found somebody to do a translation for one of our it's a small reader, a frog book, in the Anishinaabemowin language, Oji Cree. And how we do that is we don't really do a call for publications. We usually sit down, figure out what our programs need, what our facilitators are requiring us to write, and then we also brainstorm of like what do you think would be amazing to contribute to the world of education. And so we get like 5 to 10 deliverables a year. We're very fast paced, so we have to make sure that we have a publication ready within a year. Wow. Sometimes 2, which we've learned, and it's a lot of work because we're a very small team. And but we get it done, and it's amazing when we do. And now I think we've started to kind of look at how we could do a call for publications, but strictly emphasize that we are adult learning. We are strictly looking for adult focused literary works, which is kind of hard to say because sometimes we get reached out by people who want us to publish them or want us to look at their work, and it's sad to say like, oh, this is perfect, but this is a child's book, or this is a little too heavy. So a lot of our learners in our centers may be residential school survivors or part of that generational trauma. So we make sure that we create publications that aren't either triggering or today, in this new year, we've started to look at more resources that will help our programs kind of learn to assess mental illnesses, invisible mental illnesses. And so it's like, it's a lot of fun figuring out what else we can do. But then we look at it and we're like, oh no, a lot more work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work publishing, yes. Right, Dawn? We learned that together, being a first-time publisher, first-time being published author. Cindy, what's been your experience?
Well, my experience was for writing for healing, and it was a spiritual journey of self-awareness. And the first book that I was writing was to purge and take the courage to be open and allow for that spirit of healing to take its lead. And I think with finding a publisher, I think it was remarkable because my publisher is Jason Eaglespeaker Publishing, eaglespeakerpublishing.com, and he's Blackfoot, and they're located out of Alberta, and we talked about me writing under my traditional name, and it empowered me to acknowledge my writing being more spiritually driven than I was used to, I guess. But from being just creative to telling a story to actually helping writing for self-help, and looking at that the power of our stories was interconnecting with a lot of people who have gone through trauma or abuse or violence, and it was to let others know that they can find their voice through writing, and so working with Jason, it allowed me to take the time for myself to be recognized, because I don't do a lot of the promotion of the book. It's sort of like word of mouth, and yeah, I'm very shy, so I don't really talk about my writing, especially because it's under my traditional name.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's why some people even use nom de plume, the writer's name, rather than their own name, so they can just feel more free within the writing process itself. Robert, I'm just wondering what you have discovered throughout your time as a publisher, what you do as a publisher. How has it changed? Or is it the same?
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate you inviting me here.
Sure.
It is absolutely a pleasure to be here in the Six Nations territory and be able to share my experience in publishing Indigenous literature. I've been with Bookland Press since 2006, and we're very versatile. We publish fiction, non-fiction, poetry. We recently started publishing children's books. We also publish in a variety of languages, in English and French. As you know, we translate to Mohawk, Cree, Ojibwa. We started publishing Indigenous authors probably around 2010, I think. And we started receiving submissions, and I was so impressed by the quality of writing and how authentic it was. It was really written from the heart. And as a publisher, when you see that it's blood and sweat and tears, it just tells you that this is something that you need to publish. And here we go. 14, 15 years later, we have a very versatile and large book series. It calls now Modern Indigenous Voices, and we have authors, many authors from all kinds of different nations and territories. So we have several authors from Six Nations. January Rogers is one of them. We also have Marie Hess from Six Nations. We have two books. One by Marie Hess is it's a residential school story. It calls Going Back Home. And her second book is Beneath the Willows. It's also a very interesting story that we published. We also are very fortunate to publish some big names, as for example, Eskimo Pie by Norma Dunning. She won the Governor General Award last year, and also another book by Norma Dunning, Akia, The Other Side. Award-winning author is very proud to be her poetry publisher. Very talented Cree author. Francine Merasti, she actually worked on missing and murdered Aboriginal women on the committee as one of the lawyers and interviewers, and Iskate Iskyu is a fire girl. And what we also know on Bookland Press, we always try to to translate our Modern Indigenous Voices book series to as many languages as we possibly can. And it's not just applies to English and French, but also Kriya, Jibo, and we recently started going internationally. We had our books published in different languages all over the world. I was just mentioned to you that Eskimo Pie now just been translated to Greek, for example, and published in European Union. So we're trying to promote indigenous voices as much as we can in a variety of ways that it is possible. We also been exploring with screen rights and movie rights. One of the books we published was optioned for screen by a Devonshire production, which is indigenous owned by Paula Devonshire, and you probably, some of you know, Devonshire production was behind the Indian Horse award-winning movie. So we optioned the book, and hopefully the movie will be made soon. So it's absolutely pleasure to work on our Modern Indigenous Voices book series. We always looking for talented authors, or just for somebody who wants to tell us the story. We know that a lot of especially residential school survivors that not necessarily want to share the stories. This is something that they would rather forget that to tell, but we're always looking for stories to publish. So if anybody looking for a publisher, or anybody just want to talk about questions about publishing or distribution or marketing or selling rights to international markets or anything of that matter, I have my business cards, or you can always reach out to January, or just go to booklandpress.com. My door is always open.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that distribution part is a huge part of the publishing process, which, you know, oftentimes as the author, you don't really take that into consideration. You're so focused on getting the work out and getting the work right, that publication part of it, often you don't even have the capacity to consider all of the work that's required in that. Cindy, I wanted to get back to you and ask you about what you recognize to be the difference between going with a publisher who publishes on demand through Amazon and self-publishing through, you know, your organization or what have you. What are kind of the pros and cons of that?
The pros that I found is that it's it gives you more freedom to work with the publisher directly, and you can work with them and be more creative. Whereas with a publishing company, they have a team of people that support the author and have divisions or departments in their company that offset the demands of developing that book from writing right to end storefront and promotion of it, the ongoing promotion of it. And so, for example, with working with Amazon, my promotion is word of mouth, and it's just been basically working with organizations, doing presentations based on those books, and helping speaking on certain specific issues that they want to cover. And so with the recent I think last week, I was in Calgary doing the promotion of the Protector of Peace for Indigenous Peoples Day at the Calgary Public Library. Amazing. And I was really happy to be doing that with the students, and just being able to answer questions about being Haudenosaunee and our culture. And so it was a lot of cultural information sharing, and it was really important. It gave me that direct relationship with the individual versus being at maybe a corporate level where people just know the book and really maybe not the person as well.
Nice, thank you. That Calgary Public Library is a gorgeous facility. If anyone has seen it, it looks like it's new-ish, and it looks like a huge overturned canoe. It's absolutely gorgeous, lots of woodwork. Thank you for that. I wanted to talk to Gabby about the cultural aspect of publishing. And, you know, culture is such a huge word that encompasses so much of who we are. I just want, and correct me if I'm wrong, but culture is a big part of why Turtles Back Publishing exists, to promote culture and maintain, perpetuate culture. How does the publishing house navigate culture in your publications? How do you choose what to publish?
Good question. Tough question. So we make sure all of our publications are very inclusive of Indigenous knowledge, specific because our audience are Indigenous learners. And I think that's important because you pick up, for example, majority of our publications are curriculum. So you pick up a curriculum and you don't see that connection to your own culture and not necessarily to your territory, but it being just like inclusive of Indigenous peoples of all Turtle Island. So I think that's what Turtles Back does, is that we make sure that we have a holistic approach to what we have in our pieces. And the other big thing is, when I came on board, I wanted to make sure that everything was Indigenous down to the printers. So we even have printers here on the reserve, and our distributors are Indigenous. Good Minds, shout outs to Good Minds. They are an incredible team. And like even ACP, Association of Canadian Publishers, have grown to include Indigenous, more Indigenous themed presenters and committee teams, and that's kind of helped us as well. And so when we look at our curriculum, we make sure that our contributors are Indigenous, and that's not to be biased or anything. It's just because we all have a language that we understand. Mm-hmm. And you know, we have our Indigenous humor, and we have a way of looking at things. Like my way, like I like to use the example of a tree. We don't look at a tree and think of it as that's life. That's just, you know, a tree that's giving us oxygen. No, we look at down to the roots, up to the pines, to the needles, to the branch, and what it means to us spiritually, and what it means to us as Indigenous people, and how it connects all of us, and the symbolism of it growing, and we as growing as people. And so I think that's why it's important that our contributors are Indigenous, and when we, you know, again, like we just make sure to be inclusive of that, and to communicate it in that way.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I'm going to ask a question to all of the panelists here, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience. If you have any questions you'd like to ask these publishers, feel free, and the authors as well. Here's the question. We're so fortunate now to have such a library, an archive of Indigenous literature, that we can say we have things that we can critique now. Like, there's so much of it that we can critique what's there. At the same time, here's my question, is what do you see as being very present, and what do you see as still lacking in the Native literary practice? What's there still room for? Anybody?
So many.
So much.
So much. You know, it really, I was just talking to Cindy outside, like when I came up here, I wasn't reading as many Indigenous authors as I should have. And so coming up here, it's a lot of the books I read are by Indigenous authors. And to me, it's just incredible how much it's become, you know, in today's age, it's become more like it's cool to be Native, which is great, because then it gives us more ways to get out there, as far as like not just through publications, but through media, through performance arts, through art, through poems, through just expression, and even into professional field. just getting us out there, showing the world that we're not just living on a res and we're not that stereotyped Indian. We are all incredible. We have stories to tell, and we have such a background. We have so much healing that we are doing and have been doing, and with that, we contribute so much to this world. And because of that, our way of thinking as well, we don't think of ourselves. We don't just think of our communities. We think of all of our nations, and I think that's very important. And just seeing that even in the publishing industry is just impressive, and it's beautiful, and it's a must, and it's a keep going kind of thing. And then I want to say, like, thinking of your poem, that's not your poem, your play that's coming out. Even that, like, it brings out an important message of don't pretend to be Indian if you're not, but also in a humorous way. And I think that's like a great way that a lot of Indigenous people are starting to take that stand and show that importance, and kind of, looking at a person and saying, hey, stop that, and not being afraid, and not in a way where we're being like rioting or protesting, but in an artistic way, and that's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to say that. Yeah, well done. I'm happy to say that my play is getting published by Turtles Back this year. It's called Bloodsport. It's about pretend Indians. It's comedy. Go ahead.
I guess I would like to suggest that Indigenous people express themselves through poetry, songwriting. I have a story. When I was like in high school, I was about 16, and I entered a poetry contest, and I had no idea of where it went. Obviously, I never got contacted about it, but years later, I turned on the radio. And I heard Tim McGraw start singing the song "Please Remember Me," and I remembered those words that I had written, and I'm really happy to be revisiting songwriting. Happy to be involved with the Canadian Country Music Association as a songwriter, and being able to express ourselves and getting our voice. It's helping us rise from oppression, tells our stories, tells our heartache, the challenges that we have as a people. And I really would like to, tell the youth to, pick up that pencil, that paper, and just put those thoughts and feelings down and, work on it. And, there's a tune in there. We all have a voice, and we all carry a song within us. I want to acknowledge it's just not been me on this journey. It's been other people supporting myself in my growth and development, and just seeing the opportunity. I'm really happy with the progress that we've been making as a people, as a community. There are so many Indigenous writers from our community, and it's just growing. And something like this as a forum, I just want to say now for hosting this January. It's just been phenomenal, and I'm looking forward to this fall, this year and next year to see the growth.
Right on. Thank you. Yeah. Robert, what have you seen come across your desk, and what still haven't you seen come across your desk?
Well, looking back at 2010, when we started publishing Indigenous Voices, and looking at today, the general landscape, the Indigenous publishing came a long way.
Yeah.
What we have now and what we didn't have 10, 15 years ago, it's just staggering.
Yeah.
It is an absolute pleasure to see how it's moving forward, it's developing, it's growing, it's getting a lot of traction, it's getting a lot of attention. We now have so many talented indigenous translators, so many languages. A lot of publishers are interested in publishing and exploring it. We have a whole bunch of talented indigenous editors, which we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. And I guess everybody in this room understands that every book that is written by indigenous author has to be edited by an indigenous editor. And now we are very happy that it's actually happening.
Yeah.
In the distribution and marketing world, we have staggering changes and improvements that we didn't see before. Like 10 years ago, if I publish a book in Cree and I go on Amazon and I actually want to mark that this book in Cree, that it is written in Cree, I couldn't, because there was no Cree language there at all, because they only have a drop list of languages. There's like 50 languages there, but there was no Cree, there was no Ojibwa. Now they do have it.
Amazing.
Now they have it, and it's a result, again, of the development and what our industry was doing, coming together, and it's incredible, the development. Do we have challenges? Do we have many other things that we should be looking at improving? Yeah, hell yes.
Yeah.
There are whole new areas in publishing that's developing now that we would like to see. We'd like to see more digital. We'd like to see more audiobooks. We'd like to see more ebooks. Are they challenging in converting Cree or Ojibwa characters to digital books? Yes. Are we working at it? Absolutely. Are we going to make sure it's done? Absolutely. Audiobooks, digital, it's so important. It will help the market grow. It will help to get more books into readers, especially the young ones, because they want to read on digital. They want to read on all digital devices and so on. So we've come a long way, and we have a long way to go.
Right. Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Yeah, it's such an important, and again, that audio or that media way of publishing gives us another way to speak in our own voice, our own stories, and so that's really, really important. And it becomes, again, the one more job that the publisher has to take on, which is, a lot. Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask the panel or any of the authors? This is your chance. We are going to have a little schmooze after as well. So if you're shy to ask here, you can also corner these people and ask your questions about publishing or writing in particular. Anybody? Yes. Oh, no, stretching. Yes. Oops, sorry, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, well, yeah, and like, are you talking about like using the vernaculars, like using the slang and using the, the lingo? Yeah. Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, done. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. What is your name and what's the title of your books? Oh, Native American love stories and Native American fairy tales. Available where? On the Amazon. On the Amazon.
I'd like to make a comment to both of your comments. I think as Native authors, you should fight to push your words like it's your intellectual property. You don't want a publisher to change it. Any writer should say that. Any Indigenous writer should say that because I think that the publishing industry is making changes to making efforts, I should say, to respect Indigenous writers and to respect their rights and how they communicate and really wanting to educate themselves on our Indigenous languages, our slangs, our sayings, and our humor, especially our humor, because no one else gets it, like res dogs. And so it's very important, and I'm glad that you found a publisher that, you know, worked with you, and I'm glad that you found Ojistoh, because I think the relationship between a publisher and a writer is very crucial and very important because you both want to see that book win. You both want to see that book get out there and help you, not just like professionally or financially, but just really to get your story out there. So good for you.
Yeah, that publisher writer relationship is intimate as heck. Like we got to know each other pretty well through that. You know, and you're gonna hit disagreements, or your values may differ here or there, and so just be, for the new writers, just be aware of that. Is there any other questions that anybody has from the audience? Any? Yes, go ahead. Yes. Oh, yeah. Right. Right, yeah. Yeah, the comment was about the audiobooks and the authenticity that it gets added. It's added value when we can, again, record in our own voices the works that we've created. And I know I have broached the idea to Gary Joseph here through Red Door about bringing some of the authors who maybe, because it's so daunting to have to sit down and write a book, but maybe it's easier to speak the book, to speak your stories. And so that's always an option. And I think it's going to become a more and more popular option going into the future. What time are we at? Does anyone have a time? 7:20. How much? 7:23. Oh, 7:23. 8:23. Okay, good. That sounds about right. I hope we have do we have our presents available for people? We have little gifts that we want to give to our readers and also the panelists here. Darian, I'm looking at you. And also then we can feast, because there's tons of food out there. And just for the viewers who are joining us online, too bad. But we got a lot of food delivered here today. But if you're in the neighborhood, come on by because we're going to be here for the next half an hour or so. And like I said, there's tons of food. So we'll be able to, again, you'll be able to speak with the authors who are here and also the publishers and panelists. But before everybody goes, we have some presents for everyone that we want to do in a good way. Come on, girls, let's go. And sorry, that's the producer in me. Come on, girls. All right. So thank you for Robert Morgan for coming, and also for the modern Indigenous voices. We like to gift you this blanket and a card. Nyawagoa, thank you. Yes, pleasure. Cindy, thank you, hun, for coming today. And there's a gift for you. And we get, some swag. Oh, thank you. Who is this for? Oh, for me. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you. And we had did everybody put your name in for the book draw? Is the book draw? Because what this is we're going, if your name gets drawn, then you get to choose a book from the book tables that are out there. Pardon? Oh, you go ahead, come here. I'll let you, because I don't know how you're doing this.
So we have two prizes. So I'm going to draw the first name, and the winner will win a jersey, Georgia Swarm jersey signed by Brendan Bomberry. So give me a minute. Oh, Kim Hill. Okay, she actually left a number too, so I'll just give it to you. All right, and it's Kathy Hill. Huh, oh, great. I'm gonna draw one more name, and that'll be from our table. Paul Riddle. Paul? I think he left too, yeah. Oh, okay, well then I'll just draw another name. Sorry, Paul.
And this is for what? To choose a book from?
Choose a book from our Turtles Back table. Bev McComber. Great.
And choose a book from Ojistoh table.
Okay, so that first one was from
Bookland Press.
Bookland Press, so that was Kathy Hill. And then from Turtles Back Publishing table, Bev McComber. And then for Ojistoh's table, Kayla Jenkins. Yay! All right, thank you and Nitro everyone for showing up. And this was a very successful event, I think. So.
And thank you, Red Door.
And thank you, Red Door, and thank you, Ojistoh Publishing, and
Yeah, that's it.